Please remain standing.
Her Honor, the Honorable, the Lieutenant Governor.
Please be seated. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. My name is Nathan Cooper, and I have the pleasure of serving as the 14th Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you here as we observe Black Ribbon Day. Firstly, I'd like to welcome our platform party joining us today. I'd like to welcome the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, the Honourable Salma Lahani. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you here joining us. Mr. Justin Wright, the MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, who is here on behalf of the Premier and the Government of Alberta. Member Haji, the MLA for Edmonton Decor, who is here on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition. Mr. Jean Shumlis, the Honorary Consul in Poland in Edmonton. Mr. Jerry Boma, the Chair of the Edmonton Councillor Corps, and the Honorary Consul for the Netherlands in Edmonton. Ms. Therese Szepfroga, the past President of the Canadian-Polish Congress Alberta Society. Ms. Orisha Boychuk, the President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Council Alberta Provincial Chapter. Reverend Julian Beely, Vicar General and Rector of Holy Spirit Seminary. And also a special welcome to our musician, our banderist, Ola Harabara. She's from the Ukraine, and we look forward to having her perform for us today. Please welcome our honorary guests. Not that long ago, I had the opportunity to visit South Africa. And in South Africa, they have this wonderful tradition of, after everyone has been recognized, everybody else, this is a tip for everybody else, can just say, all dignitaries observed. And it will save everyone being recognized many, 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 many times. So if the platform party will come along with me for the ride, that would be also wonderful. It is a great pleasure to see a number of members of the Assembly who have joined us today. Thank you for being here. Also see a number of other members of the Councillor Corps, as well as the Acting Chief Electoral Officer, Lorraine Petrovsky. Welcome here today as well. 85 years ago, on August 23rd, 1939, representatives of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union agreed to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The pact was more than a mere diplomatic agreement. It was a harbinger of suffering. It facilitated the division of Eastern Europe and was the catalyst for the catastrophic events that would unfold during World War II and the decades of Soviet aggression that followed. Black Ribbon Day is a call to recognize and remember the strength of those who resisted, the resilience of those who endured, and the millions of lives that were lost to these vile regimes. Our act of remembrance acknowledges their pain and, perhaps as importantly, reaffirms our commitment to defend freedom and the importance of fighting the blight of totalitarianism wherever it may arise. In contrast to Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, Alberta is a province that is built on the values of democracy, freedom, and respect for human rights. Our diverse community, enriched by the contributions of over 600,000 people of Eastern European ancestry, reflects a shared commitment to these principles. It is what makes us stronger as a province. It reminds us of the very reason this building exists: to uphold democracy by respecting each other's differences. Today, as we mark Black Ribbon Day, let us renew our commitment to building a world where freedom is available to all. I'd now like to invite Ola Harabara, who lived in the Lviv region of Ukraine up until August 2022, to now perform a song entitled "In Someone Else's Captivity." Beautiful, thank you, Ola. And she will come towards the end of our ceremony to help us remember, just as she has now. It does bring me a great pleasure to welcome the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, the Honorable Salma Lahani, to share some remarks.
Thank you, Speaker Cooper. As His Majesty the King's representative in Alberta, I acknowledge all First Peoples who have called this place home for thousands of years and who welcomed us here to make our own lives. May we always dwell together on these lands with respect and understanding and a sincere commitment to walking the journey of reconciliation, and now I say reconciliation. And I'd also like to say that treaty relationships are an essential part of the Crown. And today, whilst we're celebrating here in the Rotunda Black Ribbon Day, today is the 148th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 6. And that is why I'm wearing my ribbon skirt. I was at a ceremony this morning at City Hall, and I'm wearing my Treaty 6 medallion, which was presented to me. And for those of you who don't know, there's a beautiful Treaty 6 monument just on the south grounds of the legislature, which I think you should go and visit today. So all platform party guests and dignitaries, thank you for being here today to remember the victims of Nazism and communism and to stand together against tyranny in all its forms. I want to, at this point, thank Speaker Cooper and his staff for bringing us together to commemorate Black Ribbon Day. I would also like to offer my heartfelt thanks to those among us who work every day to foster inclusion, compassion, and equality for all people here at home, across the country, and around the world. As you all know, the extreme hatred and prejudice that led to the unfathomable loss of untold millions during the Second World War and Cold War did not end with those conflicts. I have often shared my own family's experience. My family experienced the terrifying reality of totalitarian rule when we were expelled from our native Uganda in the early 1970s simply because of who we were. The dictator who ruled our country at the time did not want any of us South Asians, people who had their origins in India, but who had lived in that country for 3 generations. He decided he didn't want us there. We were no longer welcome in the only country that we had ever known as home. And you know, there have been far too many other examples of similar violence currently happening around the globe. We wear our black ribbons today as a symbol of mourning, but also as a testament for our enduring commitment to justice and freedom. The histories we remember are painful, marked by unspeakable atrocities and unimaginable suffering. But today is also a day of hope. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure and prevail. The stories of resistance, of courage, and of survival inspire us all to believe in the possibility of a better future, a future where the horrors of the past are not forgotten, but where they no longer cast their shadow over our lives. While hiding from the German occupation in Amsterdam during World War II, Anne Frank wrote in her diary, and I quote, "What is done cannot be undone, but one can prevent it from happening again," unquote. In the face of this reality, and as long as there is hatred and intolerance in the world, we have only one choice. We must all devote our energies and abilities to countering negative forces with education, determination, and a steadfast commitment to fostering peace, freedom, and civility for all around the world. As His Majesty the King's representative in Alberta, I would like to recognize and thank the Consular Corps and community leaders here today for your tireless dedication to this very important work. May the victims we honor through this ceremony rest in peace, and that their descendants find solace in our shared remembrance. May we never falter in our shared devotion to continually create a better world today and always. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I now invite MLA Justin Wright to provide remarks on behalf of the Premier of Alberta.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Wright. I'm the MLA for the charming constituency of Cypress Medicine Hat and the military liaison for the government of Alberta. And it is an honor to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of Premier Danielle Smith. Today we gather with heavy hearts as we mark a day of profound significance in our shared history. We are here to commemorate the 85th anniversary of the signing of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Black Ribbon Day stands as a solemn reminder of the atrocities that have darkened our history. It is a day of reflection where we honor the countless lives lost, the families shattered, and the enduring courage of those who stood against tyranny. As we come together this afternoon, we pay tribute to the resilient spirit that emerged from one of the darkest chapters of human history. This day is not only about remembering the past, but also about reaffirming our commitment to justice and human dignity in the present. It is a call to action for each of us to defend the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. By remembering the lessons of history, we empower ourselves to address the challenges we face today and build a future that is better for generations to come. As we wear black ribbons today, let us honor the struggles of the past and recognize that it was those struggles that laid the foundation and groundwork for the freedoms we cherish today. It is our responsibility to ensure that the sacrifices of those that came before us are never forgotten. Together, we can uphold the values of inclusivity, diversity, and the inherent worth of every single individual. On Black Ribbon Day, let us renew our commitment to the pursuit of justice and equality. Let us pledge to remain vigilant against forces that seek to undermine the principles that define us as a society. As we stand united today, let us send a clear message that our demonstration and determination to create a world free of oppression remains unwavering. Thank you for joining me and all of us here today in this commemoration. May the spirit of remembrance and resiliency continue to light the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It's my pleasure now to invite MLA Sharif Haji to bring remarks on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, platform guests, dignitaries, community members, and leaders. Good afternoon, everyone. I am MLA Sharif Haji, and on behalf of His Majesty Loyal Opposition, I'm honored to be here with you today as we remember those who were victimized by the Soviet and Nazi regimes. We are here because of August 23rd, 1939, a document was signed that changed the course of history. This agreement would go on to be one of the most sinister alliances in world history, resulting in atrocities committed against millions of Eastern Europeans. Many of those people fled their homes and families, became refugees, and traveled a great distance to settle on our beautiful prairie land. They brought with them the scars of war, overwhelming grief and sadness. And some of them arrived alone without their families or friends. But they also brought with them tenacity, a thirst for freedom, and unwavering loyalty to their culture. Only knowledge of the past missteps can help us move forward, recognizing that human life and democracy are two of our most precious assets. And we put that knowledge into action to aid and comfort our fellow human beings who still live in a fear of violence and oppression in their homes at this very moment. Here in Canada, especially here in Alberta, we can stand up together against tyranny and exclusivity to ensure Alberta is safe and comfortable home for everyone. A place where different cultures can not only exist but thrive together. As we remember those we have lost, let us also remember the importance of kindness, what we can do to help our fellow Albertans prosper. We all stand together. We grieve together. And we are hopeful together. And together, we make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadji. We now have a pre-recorded message from the Ambassador of Poland, His Excellency Witold Jilski.
Your Honor, Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, Alberta government representatives, members of Legislative Assembly of Alberta, Excellencies, members of diplomatic missions, Poland's Honorary Consul, Droga Polonio, distinguished members of First Nations and community leaders in Canada, ladies and gentlemen, Szanowni Państwo. Today, we mark the 85th anniversary of the Black Ribbon Day, a solemn occasion of remembrance and reflection. As the Polish ambassador to Canada, it is both an honor and a profound duty to share with you my thoughts on the horrors and victims of totalitarian regimes and the dark chapters of our history. On this day, we recall the tragic events set into motion on August 23, 1939, when the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed between Nazi Germany and Soviet Union. This agreement, supposedly a non-aggression pact, was in truth a sinister alliance that divided Central and Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, paving the way for brutal occupation and the onset of World War II. Today, the war in Ukraine reminds us that the scepter of aggression and authoritarianism has not vanished. Poland has borne witness to the immediate impact of the Russian invasion. We have opened our arms to millions of Ukrainian refugees, providing shelter, sustenance, and hope to those fleeing the ravages of war. Poland's contribution has gone way beyond humanitarian aid. From the onset of the war, we provided and continue to provide Ukraine with crucial military equipment, reinforcing resolve of our Ukrainian brothers and sisters and enabling them to defend their homeland. We are grateful for the unity of the free world in facing these challenges together. Russia cannot be allowed to win the war, to create its sphere of influence or reshape the borders in Europe. If Russia wins, it will translate into chronic instability in our part of the world. It will give fuel to a coalition of dictatorships across the globe. Canada, along with Poland, has been at the forefront of countries supporting Ukraine in every possible way. Also for that reason, leaders from Poland and Canada have met an unprecedented number of times since 2022. One of the latest examples is the historic visit of President Andrzej Duda to Alberta past April. Poland's head of state, together with the first ever Poland's hydrogen mission to Canada, joined Premier Daniel Smith in inaugurating the Hydrogen Convention in Edmonton. As one should expect, President's busy program was filled with strategic conversations on energy security and strengthening the direct ties of Alberta and our region. Let me again thank all the Alberta friends for your support in making the visit a success. As I had the chance to visit Alberta 3 times in the last 12 months, I find the province very close to my heart. And so on Black Ribbon Day, I know well that Albertans understand well the significance of us jointly reaffirming our commitment to values of freedom, democracy, and human rights. These values are the foundation upon which we stand united against tyranny and oppression. Today, they resonate with particular urgency as we witness ongoing conflicts and aggression in various parts of the world. Dziękuję. Thank you.
Mr. Shumlis has actively been involved in coordinating our ceremony today and for the last number of years. We thank him for his service to his community and to our province, and I invite him now to bring his remarks.
Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, and in keeping with your direction, I will indicate to all dignitaries who have been recognized, thank you to all of our special guests for taking a few moments of your time to attend our event today. Today marks the 14th year in a row that I have assembled a dedicated group of volunteers to organize this event. Gathering here in the People's House is a testament that all of us must always be on guard against the tyranny of despots. Yes, August 23rd, 1939, 2 despots, Hitler and Stalin, agreed to divide Poland, and World War II commenced. Today, the madman of Moscow has for 914 days, 2 years, 6 months, and 2 days attempted to silence our Ukrainian cousins. Never would I have imagined that a war in Europe would occur. My World War II deported parents constantly reminded their 5 sons that we must never cast aside our individual responsibility to be on guard to prevent a new Hitler, a new Stalin, from eliminating a free press, smoldering the population with lies and more lies. This year I selected to have our Black Ribbon event focus on the unimaginable war that continues in Europe. We all have a duty and a responsibility to draw attention to the heinous crimes against humanity that totalitarian regimes inflict upon innocent individuals. August 23rd, 1939 set the course for Nazi Germany from the west and Soviet Russia from the east to undertake their evil. February 24th, 2022 set the course for what the madman from Moscow stated would only take 3 days, to occupy and conquer Kiev. Well, as Hitler and Stalin were defeated, I firmly believe that Putin too will be defeated. Soon, I pray. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, tomorrow, August 24th, marks 33 years since Ukraine regained its independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Exactly 3 months since Russia invaded. As Polish President Duda stated this week, Russian aggression is a credibility test for the democratic states of the free world. If we help Ukraine defend itself, to remain independent, freedom and international law will prevail. As Martin Luther King taught us, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. We all must not be silent. In concluding, permit me to say that on behalf of all of us, a special thanks go to you, Mr. Speaker, for again allowing us to come together here in the People's House. I wish to acknowledge and thank again our Lieutenant Governor for her inspirational message, her presence, and her delightful address. That ribbon dress is beautiful. Thank you. You know, and MLAs Wright and Hadje and a number of other MLAs that are here, thank you. On behalf of the honorary consuls that are present, again, thank you. Sadly, we'll be departing here very quickly because one of our colleagues, the honorary consul of Latvia, who has worked with me in previous Black Ribbon Days, passed away, and her funeral is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. To our platform guests, we thank you for agreeing to share with us your knowledge and wisdom, and a special thank you to our refugee from Ukraine, who's been here for 2 years now. We thank you for your talent, and we look forward to your next number. And finally, Mr. Speaker, your office staff, led by your executive assistant, and her members of her office, they are extremely well organized. And for that, thank you, Katya. Again, wherever you are, she usually is upstairs. Thank you, Katya, and your staff for your work. Last but not least, thank you to each of you who are here in our home of democracy today, and those who are watching from their homes on the internet. Let us not be silent. Let us all pray for peace, both in Europe, in the Middle East, and all places in this small planet of ours where bullets, bombs, and death are present. Thank you again ever so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John, for your remarks this afternoon. And let me also just say thank you to you and the entire Polish community for the outsized contribution that you make, and particularly that you make to assisting our Ukrainian friends and the thousands of refugees who have come to our province during a time of need. I'll now invite Jerry Boma, the Honorary Consul for the Netherlands in Edmonton, to provide remarks.
Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, honorable members and guests, people and friends of Poland. You mentioned Anne Frank, born in Amsterdam, 1929, the same year my parents were born, a few miles away, endured the occupation, and of course had a huge mark on their lives and in my life. We live in uncertain times, a time when large forces of politics, economics, and environmental consequences seem overwhelming. And it's not uncommon to hear this question: what can I, as a single individual, do to change the course of these events? This non-aggression pact, signed 85 years ago today, is a stark and very clear reminder of how individuals, one at a time, did indeed change the course of history. The starting point, one individual whose evil ideology and his ability to communicate and infect an entire nation, an ideology with a mission to wipe out an entire race of people, to extinguish a competing ideology, Marxism, and to take over an entire region for the expansion, Lebensraum, for his master race, all clearly stated and written down 15 years earlier. And a treaty agreed to by another individual who knowingly overlooked these stated ambitions, and because of his own greed and lust for power, viewed the opportunity to take the eastern half of Poland as too tempting to ignore. And sure enough, within 7 days, the rape of Poland began. And within 2 years, that first individual executed his mission with a vengeance, unleashing the most ferocious and destructive military campaign the world has ever seen. The consequences of that action remain with us today. But fortunately, another individual in Great Britain, Winston Churchill, imbued with a sense of destiny, gave England the courage to stand and fight a time when all seemed lost. And supported by yet another individual, Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the USA, who against great political resistance found a way to support England in its hour of greatest need. The words of Margaret Mead, a famous anthropologist, have never rung more true. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So today is indeed a day to remember the tragedies and the suffering of the Polish people, the millions that lost their lives in Poland, and the millions throughout Europe and Asia who lost their lives in the years to follow. But most importantly, a day to remember the power of the individual, each of us, that our own words and actions matter. That is the real lesson here, that we as individuals matter and can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Now I'd like to welcome another one of our organizers who've put together and added a lot of work and value to our ceremony today, Ms. Therese Schlempfreiga, to provide remarks. She is the past president of the Canadian Polish Congress, Alberta Society.
Thank you. I enjoyed how you pronounced my name. It's okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Platform guests, government guests, and guests from our communities. The Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was signed 85 years ago today, August 23rd, 1939. It was a non-aggression pact between the totalitarian regimes of Nazi Germany and the Communist Soviet Union. Since 2009, it has been commemorated in Canada as the National Day of Remembrance for the victims of communism and Nazism in Europe. Consequently, we gather here today, every year, to always remember and never forget the victims and the survivors of that wicked time. Although both regimes agreed to end violence between themselves, they also agreed to carve the European continent into two separate spheres, the Nazi West and the Communist East, thus creating a catalyst for a vicious war that would change Europe and the world forever. However, the pact would only last until June 22, 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa and invaded the Soviet Union. During the summer of 1939, my father, his brother, and their mother were living in Drohobych, Poland, now Ukraine. Zbigniew, my father, was 19 years old, and Tadeusz, my uncle, was only 24 on September 1st, 1939, when the Nazi forces marched into Poland from the west. 16 days later, communist forces would invade from the east. A few months later, in 1940, Tadeusz would be arrested and sentenced to death by the NKVD, who were responsible for state security through massive political repression, including the authorized murders of many thousands of politicians and citizens, as well as kidnappings, assassinations, and mass deportations. In spite of numerous inquiries through the Red Cross and other agencies, it was only many years later that we found out what had really happened to Tadeusz. My grandmother was keeping some fabric for a suit for him when she could welcome him home. Of course, he never returned home. Subsequently, Zbigniew would also be arrested by the NKVD. He was sent to a forced labor camp in Vorkuta, or Vokutlag in the Komi Republic, approximately 160 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. It was known as one of the Soviet Union's harshest camps. Following my father's arrest, his mother, Władysława, was deported in 1940 to Kazakhstan and repatriated in 1946. My father told me her treatment would have been much worse if he had not admitted to having attached a weapon to the underside of their table. His courage helped her, but worked against him in his sentencing. However, thankfully, my father's story doesn't end in Vorkuta. Based on the Polish-Soviet agreement of July 30th, 1941, Zbigniew was released on September 23rd, ironically his birthday, 1942, to join General Anders' army. He served in the Middle East from 1942 to 1943, and in the United Kingdom from 1943 to 1946. I was born just a few years later. My family's story may sound unusual to some of you, but my family and so many other families were deeply traumatized as loved ones were taken away, beaten, tortured, starved, and murdered. Some persevered and survived. Today, Russia is pursuing a similar ambition. With its invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin is once again trying to expand its borders by forcing to legitimize its imperialist claims on a land and a people that do not and will not belong to them. To those of you who share a similar nightmarish history, we are neighbors in Europe, and we are neighbors here in this city, in this country. May God bless Ukraine and give her strength during these horrific times as she fights to defend her sovereignty and independence in Russia's illegal war of aggression. And in Polish, I would say, Niech Pan błogosławi Ukrainę. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal family story. It is a stark reminder of the incredible consequences that the aggression had, not just in terms of massive numbers, but also that each one of those numbers was a very, very important story. Ms. Orysia Boychuk is the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council. Ms. Boychuk has been actively involved with assisting and advocating for many Ukrainian immigrants who have recently called Edmonton and Alberta their home. She and many in the Ukrainian community have done an incredible job of welcoming people to Alberta, ensuring they have access to resources, and is a strong advocate for freedom in Ukraine. Please welcome Ms. Boychuk to provide her remarks.
Thank you. Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, elected officials, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, it is a real privilege to bring greetings as we commemorate the Black Ribbon Day here today. We wholeheartedly support the Black Ribbon Day commemorations. Today, as we observe this day, we remember that the victims of the two most brutal regimes in modern history, Nazism and Soviet communism. This day serves as a solemn reminder of the devastation brought by the totalitarian regime and ideologies, which led to unimaginable suffering, the suppression of freedom, the loss of millions of innocent lives across Europe, including my own family's lives. My family lost many lives and were also displaced during this period of time. My father, my grandfather, my mother, and my mother's parents all were displaced during World War II and spent time in German work camps. They've made their way here, thankfully, to Canada, and we were able to reestablish our family. Black Ribbon Day commemorates the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, an agreement between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union that not only divided Eastern Europe, but also set the stage for years of occupation, repression, and terror. The scars of this dark chapter in our history still runs deep in the nations that were once caught between two oppressive forces. Today, we have an opportunity to reflect on this history. We cannot ignore the parallels with the ongoing war in Ukraine today. Once again, we see the sovereign nation struggling against an aggressor that seeks to impose its will through violence and through fear. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia is the stark reminder that the shadows of past totalitarianism has not fully rescinded. The atrocities committed in places such as Bucha, Mariupol, echo the horrors of the 20th century, where civilians are targeted, freedoms are crushed, and the dignity of human life is disregarded. Today, my family in Ukraine is fighting for Ukraine's freedom. I have a cousin, 23 years old, who is in the Air Forces fighting this battle. My family has also been displaced. They are living across Europe and in Canada, trying to reestablish themselves. Just as Black Ribbon Day calls us to remember the past, I also urge you to act in the present. The international community must stand united in its support for Ukraine, its people, who are courageously defending their rights to self-determination, democracy, and peace. We must ensure that the lessons of our history are not forgotten and that the sacrifices of those who suffered under totalitarianism regimes were not in vain. As we honor the victims of the past, let us also commit ourselves to supporting the victims of today. Let us speak out against aggression and injustice, and let us work together to build the future where the horrors of Black Ribbon Day are consigned to history and where the people of Ukraine and all nations can live in peace and freedom. Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for your efforts to support members of the Ukrainian community. I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge the presence of member Andrew Boychenko, who is the first Ukrainian-born member of the Legislative Assembly, as well as Jackie Armstrong-Hominick, who represents the constituency of Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville and has done an incredible job helping resettle Ukrainians to Alberta. I'd now like to call upon Reverend Julian Bealey to provide the invocation.
Your Honor, Your Excellency, the Honorable Nathan Cooper, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, platform guests, elected officials, friends. Glory be to Jesus Christ. On behalf of the Ukrainian Catholics in Alberta, and in gratitude to the Honorary Consul of Poland, John Shumlas, for his kind invitation, I am pleased to address you today on the occasion of the annual Black Ribbon Day, in particular about the plight of Ukrainians as a result of the Russian aggressor. We sometimes forget that the most recent war in Ukraine did not begin on February 24th, 2022, when Russia ordered a mass mobilization and marched on Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, in an attempt to topple the government and demilitarize and denazify the country. Rather, the war against Ukraine, and not just the special military operation, began in 2014 with Russian unrest in the east and south of Ukraine, in particular Crimea and the Donbas regions. The 10-year war has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed in action on both sides, and within Ukraine, massive direct and indirect civilian casualties, extensive destruction of civilian infrastructure, capture and torture of soldiers and civilians alike, war crimes, weaponization of food, threat to nuclear and energy security, ecological disasters, and more. Millions of Ukraine's citizens live in constant fear with frequent and unpredictable nightly missile attacks, forcing its population, many of them children and elderly, to seek shelter underground. The basics of life, such as food, water, shelter, and medicine, are at times in short supply and difficult to obtain. Mass killings, sexual violence, rape and torture of children, women and men are common occurrences. Over 100,000 civilian structures, including homes, apartment buildings, hospitals, schools, and places of worship, have been damaged and destroyed. Forced deportation and Russian repassportization, including estimates of 200 to 300,000 children from Ukraine to Russia, continue to occur. Food security worldwide is being threatened, in particular with the Black Sea Grain Initiative. 600 million people depend directly on Ukraine's agricultural production, including those in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. The unwillingness on the part of Russia to allow safe passage of sea vessels from Ukrainian ports has led to an artificial humanitarian food crisis. Ukraine is one of the most mined countries in the world, with enemy mines covering about 1/3 of the country. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is held hostage by Russia, a direct threat to the nuclear safety of all, with escalating talk on the part of some Russian officials that nuclear strikes on Ukraine are justified. The detonation of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant by the Russian occupiers is a war crime of ecocide, an environmental weapon of mass destruction. Killing, displacing, and affecting hundreds of thousands of people. The withholding of oil and heating products by Russia led to a wake-up call this past winter for many European countries. In short, Russia's unjust war of aggression against Ukraine has brought about untold human suffering not only in Ukraine, but throughout the world. Despite international condemnation, the full-on invasion has forced the polarization of world powers seemingly edging towards world war, albeit in stealth mode at the present. It is estimated that since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there are 5.1 million internally displaced people in Ukraine. 17.6 million people in Ukraine are in need of humanitarian assistance, and more than 6.6 million refugees have left Ukraine. A full 1/2 of Ukraine's population of 38 million, to put things into perspective, roughly the same population as Canada, are directly affected by the war. The war in Ukraine has triggered Europe's largest displacement crisis since World War II. Of the 6.6 million refugees who have left Ukraine, most fled the country by crossing the border with Poland, settling there and in Hungary, Moldova, Germany, Austria, Romania, and other European countries. Over 1 million have applied to come to Canada, with 300,000 already landed, some 60,000 settling in our fair province of Alberta. And now, a word of gratitude. We are grateful to the international community who stand with Ukraine in their hour of need. We are grateful to the millions throughout the world who responded and continue to respond to the growing humanitarian crisis of a people on the move. We are grateful to the Polish community who were the first to receive those fleeing the war in Ukraine, and to the other European countries who did the same. We are grateful to Canada and the province of Alberta in particular for its willingness to welcome Ukrainian refugees and migrants. We are grateful to those who stand for freedom and democracy in the midst of tyranny and a desire to rebuild the Soviet Empire. And finally, we are grateful to Almighty God for God's unfailing love and compassion. Please stand. Let us pray. O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, we entreat you to hear the earnest prayer of your people for your afflicted children in Ukraine, as well as in the Holy Land and throughout the world, where there is conflict and war. Deliver your vulnerable people from unjust aggressors, foreign invasion, and the terror of war. Grant us peace, so that all people may abide in tranquility, justice, and freedom, which reflects your kingdom, where you reign with your eternal Father and your most holy, good, and life-giving Spirit, now and forever and ever. Amen. And please remain standing for a moment of silence to honor the victims and survivors. Please be seated.
Thank you, Reverend Bealey. As we move to the conclusion of our ceremony today, Ola will perform one more musical interlude for us. It is entitled Prayer for Ukraine. Thank you, Ola, and thank you all for your heartfelt tributes to the many lives lost because of this fateful day 85 years ago. I encourage us all to honor the past and reflect upon the present. Even here today, we come from a diverse group of political views, of faith backgrounds, of countries around the world, and yet we share so much in common. A shared belief in freedom, of dignity in human life, and a common cause of a better world for others. I hope that we can all commit to a future where such atrocities are not only remembered, but are actively prevented. And to our friends in Eastern and Central Europe, and those of that ancestry, we grieve with you today. We stand with you in the memory of the devastating loss of so many who gave the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms of others. At the conclusion of our ceremony, I'd like to invite the platform party to the grand staircase for a very quick photograph. I invite all guests to please enjoy the coffee and tea that's been provided. Thank you for joining us today. Glory to the heroes, Slava Ukraini. May God bless Alberta, and may God bless you.